Ryder Cup was already his. 4 holes left, 4-shot lead, 1 safe swing from sealing victory for his country. Mark Calcaveia stood on the tee with everything a golfer dreams of: dominance, control, and a match that was mathematically over. Teammates were celebrating. Commentators were calling it decisive. The crowd could feel the trophy tilting toward America. Then he hit the shot. It started low, too low, skidding across the wind before vanishing into water. And the roar turned into a gasp. Confidence turned into panic. And in the next few minutes, the impossible unfolded in front of millions watching worldwide. A champion unraveled. A match slipped away. A career moment fractured in real time, because golf does not always destroy you slowly. Sometimes it happens in 1 hole, 1 swing, 1 collapse that follows you for the rest of your life. This is the story of the golfer who had everything and lost it all before the 18th green. Before the hole that would follow him forever, Mark Calcaveia was not a cautionary tale. He was proof that persistence could turn into greatness. By the late 1980s, his career had transformed into something extraordinary. He had climbed from tour failures and obscurity to the highest tier of professional golf. A major champion, a multiple-time PGA Tour winner, and one of the most aggressive competitors in the game. The boy from a Nebraska cornfield had reached the summit of the sport. Royal Troon in 1989 cemented that status. Under the brutal wind and pressure of an Open Championship playoff, Calcaveia outplayed Greg Norman and lifted the claret jug, golf's oldest and most sacred trophy. In that moment, his place among elite champions felt undeniable, and the success didn't fade. He won repeatedly on the PGA Tour. He dominated the Phoenix Open 3 times. He produced stretches of scoring brilliance few players in history have matched. Years later, he would even set a tour record with 9 consecutive birdies, a streak that still stands. But statistics only tell part of what he had: confidence, momentum, respect. Competitors knew that when Calcaveia attacked a course, he did it without hesitation. His style was fearless, relentless, unapologetically aggressive. The exact mentality that turns contenders into champions. By the time he arrived at Kiowa Island in 1991, he carried everything a golfer could want: major winning pedigree, team leadership expectations, and the belief that he belonged on the sport's biggest stage. He had already proven he could win. He had already reached the top, which is why what happened next felt so impossible. And because the higher a champion climbs, the further a single hole can make him fall. The 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island was never meant to be an ordinary tournament. They called it the War by the Shore, America versus Europe, hostile crowds, national pride, and pressure unlike anything in individual golf. For Mark Calcaveia, it was more than a team event. It was validation. He was no longer just a major champion or tour winner. He was now one of the leaders of American golf, chosen to carry momentum into the most emotionally charged matches in the sport. Captain Dave Stockton placed him early in the Sunday singles lineup for a reason. When Calcaveia played aggressively, entire leaderboards tilted with him. And on that Sunday, he delivered exactly what was expected. From the opening holes, he overwhelmed Colin Montgomery with relentless attacking golf. Birdies, pressure, control. By the turn, Calcaveia was 5 holes ahead, a crushing margin in match play. The American crowd erupted. Teammates watched the scoreboard and surged with confidence. Everything about the match pointed toward inevitability. 4 holes remaining, 4-hole lead, only a half point needed to secure victory. In Ryder Cup math, that position is nearly unlosable. The match was effectively finished. Calcaveia had done exactly what captains dream of: set the tone, break the opponent, and put the trophy within reach of his team. When he walked toward the closing stretch, not as a man under pressure, but as a champion completing the job. Which is why the collapse that followed felt unreal in real time, because golf rarely turns in an instant. But sometimes in the most brutal tournaments, everything changes on the next hole. Hole 15 at Kiowa Island should have been routine. Mark Calcaveia stood on the tee 4 holes ahead with 4 to play. The math was simple. Have any one of the remaining holes, And in the match, and effectively the Ryder Cup point was secured. The pressure was gone. The finish line was visible. Then he swung. The drive drifted right and kept drifting. It splashed into the water. A mistake, but not fatal. Champions recover. But the rhythm was gone now. The swing that had built a 5-hole lead suddenly looked rushed, uncertain. He took his drop, played on, and watched the hole slip away into triple bogey. Montgomery won it. The lead shrank. Still safe. Still ahead. Still in control. Hole 16 arrived, and with it, another miss, a poor approach, another lost hole. The cushion was bleeding out fast, and 4 ahead became 2, and then came the shot that froze his career in memory. The par 3/17. Water everywhere. Montgomery struck first and dumped his tee shot into the lake. The hole was now handed to Calcaveia. Any safe shot to dry land would win the match. He chose a 2-iron, his trusted aggressive weapon. The ball never climbed, and it left the club low, skidding forward, barely rising before diving straight into the same water. Broadcaster Johnny Miller said what millions were thinking. That is the worst shot a professional golfer has ever hit. Calcaveia then missed a 2-foot putt to have the hole. In less than 5 minutes, the man who had everything had begun losing it all. By the time Mark Calcaveia walked to the 18th tee, the match no longer felt real. Just minutes earlier, and he had been 4 holes ahead, untouchable, dominant, the emotional engine of the American team. Now the scoreboard told a different story, only 1 hole ahead with everything suddenly fragile. The swing that had looked fearless all afternoon now carried hesitation. The rhythm was gone. Pressure in golf does not always arrive slowly. Sometimes it detonates. Calcaveia's shoulders tightened. His tempo shortened. The aggressive certainty that defined his career had flipped into urgency. Players often describe this state as playing not to win, but not to lose. And in elite golf, that mental shift can be fatal. On 18, the unraveling completed itself. A missed opportunity. A bogey. Montgomery's steady par erased the lead entirely. The match, once inevitable, ended, only halved. But the real collapse happened after the final putt. Calcaveia left the green immediately, unable to face the ceremony. A television reporter found him moments later not angry, not composed, but crying uncontrollably, hyperventilating in the broadcast compound. The weight of what he believed he had cost his team crushed him in real time. He later admitted he was certain one lost half point would lose the Ryder Cup for the United States. The champion who had dominated for 14 holes had mentally fallen apart in 4. In the immediate hours after Kiowa Island, Mark Calcaveia believed he had lost more than a match. He believed he had lost the Ryder Cup for his country. He had left the course before the ceremony, convinced his collapse would define the entire event. Teammates and officials eventually brought him back, but the damage inside him was already done. The image of those closing holes, water, misses, disbelief, replayed relentlessly. What Calcaveia did not yet know was that the United States would still win the Ryder Cup later that day when Europe missed a final putt in the last match, and his half point had not cost the team the trophy. But sport is not decided only by results. It is decided by memory, and in golf, memory can be merciless. Years later, Calcaveia admitted that every important short shot afterward carried the shadow of Kiowa. The trust he once felt over the ball was never quite as automatic. The aggressive certainty that defined his rise now carried a trace of caution. He continued playing, he continued winning. He built longevity few professionals ever need achieve. Yet whenever his career was discussed, then the conversation always circled back to the same place. The hole he should have closed, the match he should have finished, the moment that should have crowned him hero and instead followed him forever. Because some shots in golf end a tournament, and some echo through an entire life. Mark Calcaveia's career lasted decades, major champion, multiple tour victories, over 1,000 professional starts. Yeah, by any measure, it was the resume of an elite golfer. And yet, when his name is remembered, one hole still rises above everything else. Not Royal Troon, not Phoenix dominance, not record birdie streaks. Kiowa Island, hole 15 through 18. That's the cruelty of golf. a sport where perfection is demanded, but collapse is unforgettable. Calcaveia himself admitted that after Kiowa, every crucial short shot felt different, touched by memory and doubt. But there is another truth inside his story. He did not quit. He did not disappear. He kept playing for 40 more years. So perhaps the legacy of that hole is not failure. It is survival. Because sometimes greatness in golf is not avoiding the fall, but continuing to swing after it.